Hello, this is Michael Rees. Welcome to Ad Hoc, a virtual talk series. I'm a sculptor and new media naut. I'm here to have fun and sharp conversations with some of the smartest people in art, technology, and sculpture. My interests and those of our guests will range far and wide and focus on making and the artist's role in our current era. We'll be talking to artists, curators, designers, and more. Welcome to Ad Hoc. So I should sort of be introductory and say that we're talking this morning with Tamiko Thiel. And Tamiko, you live in Berlin, is that right?
No. I live in Munich. I'm like the only German-based artist who doesn't live in Berlin.
Ah, I see. There you go, Munich.
It's an accident of history. I came to Europe to go to art school. I landed in Munich, and haven't left yet.
Wow.
I tried to leave several times, and then each time we had to come back because I'm married to a German, and his family is here. His business network is here. So
got it.
And it's not so bad.
Well, you know, I studied in Germany too.
I didn't realize you were in Dusseldorf and studied with Joseph Beuys.
Yeah.
And that was the same time I was at the Academy here in Munich from like 85 to 91. And I think during that time you were actually in Dusseldorf, right?
Yeah, let's see. Let me think about that for a second. No. I was in Dusseldorf, I think, in 84.
84, so
yeah,
before
84.
That. It was somewhere in your book here.
Right. I think that's right. But yeah, isn't that funny? You know, I have some kind of penchant for the German thing. I don't know what it is. I mean, they love philosophy. They love art.
What's there not to like?
Good stuff, right? Good stuff.
But how was it? I mean, were you an actual student of Beuys?
Yeah.
Were you in his class?
Yeah, I mean, he was very aloof, as you can imagine. So it turned out that I ended up, in an official sense, of being in the Uker class.
Mm-hmm.
And Gunther Uker.
He's not that either.
No, that's very interesting too.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I met Beuys a few times and all that sort of stuff. And I have some stories and, all that. And
we'll have to get together again and so I can hear those stories.
Yeah, exactly. He loved to smoke these they were cigarettes that the farmers smoked. I think they had a big 10 on them or something. I can't remember. And they were a black tobacco. They're very heavy. So you could always kind of get in with him a little bit if you were carrying those cigarettes. And which is funny that you don't think of him as a smoker, but he was.
He was probably also besieged by the students. I mean, he had sort of deity-like status at that point.
Yeah, he certainly did.
And he was supposed to come and talk at the Academy in Munich, and he died literally days before it happened.
Oh, really? Now, what year was that? Was that 87 or so?
I'm not sure. It might even have been later, like 89 or so. I'm not sure.
I don't think it was that late because I think it was 87, 88, something like that. Right? Isn't that funny? You remember that too?
Yeah.
But well, so much for Joseph Beuys. Who cares? Look, I have you here to talk to. That's so much better. So much better. So I was really interested. I spent a little time being on your website, which of course is your name, tamikothiel.com. It's .com, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I was really pleased to see you're very active. You've got all kinds of projects going on all the time, all over the place. But also, I was pleased to see that you have a really great section of your website dedicated to theory. Some articles you've written and some articles you recommend to other people around augmented reality and that kind of thing. Right. And I thought it'd be interesting to kind of, maybe that might be a little bit of an entryway into the way you think about making work and what your general framework is. You're very involved in AR, obviously, and have been for a long time. So do you want to comment on that or enlarge that for us?
I mean, the reason that I put up that page was that you know, I've never had a permanent position or a long time teaching position, but I've often had guest professorships, and there's kind of a side aspect that because technology changes so fast, that especially with AR, every time I taught an AR class, it had to be with a completely different platform, because the platforms I'd used before didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And also the technology had changed enough, so there was, there were rather different criteria. So I put up that page partly, I suppose if I was a professor with a steady job like you, I would have had my corpus of classes and materials, and this page is kind of the references that I always recommend.
Yeah.
And so, part of it is, as you mentioned, my own writings and my own work, but there's also, there's a lot of things that do not get cited as part of the material one should read about virtual reality or augmented reality, which I, however, also coming from a time before like everyone was working in VR. I started working in VR in 1994, and at that point, there was very, very little, because you could really only do virtual reality in maybe like 5 places in the world. ZKM in Germany, and then some universities in the US, and ATR in Japan, and so there wasn't a lot of corpus on that, because a lot of what they were talking about was just dealing with the technology. And I actually sort of avoided working with VR until the technology got to a point where you could actually do very texture-rich worlds. And it turns out, and at that point was also the point where it ran on, $5,000 PCs instead of $100,000 or $200,000 workstations.
Yeah, right.
So we're talking the early mid 90s. And when I started teaching about this sort of stuff, I was more interested in the use of it to tell stories, but sort of non-narrative or non-linear stories, or for creating more sort of art installations rather than the more sort of cinematic types of VR that is so common now, because this entire film branch just sort of jumped on the technology once it became available to them.
Right.
So for instance, one of my really go-to books is Margaret Wertheim's Pearly Gates of Cyberspace, which came out in 1999. So after the World Wide Web had been around for around 5 years or so. And so she was reacting to the World Wide Web, but in the context of Dante.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure the sort of reference you really appreciate. Because she was talking about conceptions of space, and about how, until essentially the astronomers pushed back the barriers of the unknown and unknowable outer space, it was very easy to fill that space with with all sorts of fantasies, fairies, gods, demons, heavens, whatever. And then with the advent of science, then when you can start seeing at huge different distances, and when you can, with microscopes, and see down to microscopic levels, she says basically the space for fantasy in some sense got less and less, because it was clear that these conceptions we had of these parallel virtual worlds, or unseeable worlds that would only, the people would, or the spirits would pop in and out of our world, but it was multiple dimensions that were overlaid on our quote unquote real world, and much more closely knit together with the world of dreams, the world of religion, the world of spirits, that there wasn't as much space for that, especially if you like to think in a technological scientific way. And so when the World Wide Web came out, her thesis in this book is that all of a sudden that gave us an infinite space back for the fantasy. All of a sudden, we could start talking again about parallel universes that we could construct ourselves. And this is, I think, exactly what we're doing in both virtual reality and in augmented reality. So I see her book as really a, at some level, you might say, my Bible for creating XR of all types. And so I think that is very important for anybody who would be studying it. My husband's like running through the back of the virtual. So you might hear some weird sounds from my parallel universe that's hiding behind this photograph of my AR on top of your sculptures. So that's only like one of the references I have there, and other references are, Brenda Laurel, Computers as Theater, Leonard B. Meyer, Emotion and Meaning in Music, and then my father's work in his book, People, Paths and Purposes. Dad's life work was the perception and, of course, the creation of sequences of spaces in architecture and in urban planning. And so all of these references deal with creating dramatic experience that's not necessarily narrative. It's not about this character meets that character, but it's about your perception as the protagonist going through an experience where you're meeting the virtual world, or you're meeting an augmented world, and how you can create a dynamic experience, a dynamic arc, a theatrical arc, without falling back on, you've got to have a story, and there's got to be a protagonist, and the protagonist's got to have an antagonist and a love interest, and they have to be either people or animals that look like people. We're talking about the first person perspective. This is me, or my user or my viewer, encountering the virtual world that I've created. And that in itself can be given a dramatic structure, but it's much more abstract than, the hero's journey, or, these narrative devices.
Right. That's fascinating. So, also the notion of assemblage against Deleuze, and that stuff. I thought that was interesting too. But now, at the same time, you are one of, actually, there are three people in the show. You're one of them that are founding members of Manifest AR. And you guys put that together, or pulled that together around 2011. Is that right?
Actually 2010, and 2010? It was actually the three of us, John Craig Freeman, Will Pappenheimer, and myself, essentially were brought on board by the two people who actually thought up and organized it, and that was Mark Spark in New York City and Sander Wienhof, who's based in Amsterdam. And both of them had been working with AR before, when it was still quite a kludgy system. And basically at the beginning of October 2010, I got an email from Mark. Mark had been doing VR before, and we had been in a show together in Boston Cyber Arts. And he just said, hey, we're going to invade MoMA. MoMA doesn't know anything about it, and we're not going to tell them, and they don't get a say in what we put up. So just send me some 3D content, and I'll put it up for you as, as AR on mobile devices. And I went, oh my God, is it really? Are we really that far along? Yes, here's some content. So I sent them this grid of screening faces that I call the ART Critic Face Matrix. And they put it up, and I had a flash mob, and Mark was really interested in getting a very wide range of people. It's quite possible that, at least officially, Claudia Hart was part of the group. I don't know. I mean, she never was.
Sure, Chris Manzione. So
Chris
yeah,
is
so actually
definitely
it's 4.
there.
I'm not sure that Claudia was part of.
I'm not sure if she was.
Yeah, because I kind of introduced Claudia to AR back.
So okay.
Around this time of the real fake, she did an exhibition that I helped organize parts of it, and then we did an exhibition called The Really Fake, and that was the AR component.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was, gosh, I don't remember the date offhand. I'm thinking that's like 2000. I don't remember. Sorry.
Yeah, but somewhere in your book, she's mentioned and as a founder, and actually, so I was going like, was she really? I can't remember. But yes, Chris Manzione was also part of the group. But basically, that was so much about, look, the technology is at the point where we can place our work wherever we want to, and walls cannot keep us out, and they cannot keep us in. So it was this immense sense of freedom that we all had when we realized the technology had reached that point.
And that was specifically, just a fine point, not a big deal, but that was specifically because of the geolocation. You guys your focus was using geolocation to be able to reach across all kinds of physical boundaries and even abstract legal boundaries, all kinds of things, and plant something through geolocation in a space.
Exactly, just by using the GPS and saying this artwork will be at this GPS location, and anyone who is there physically and opens our app will find that. And it was really about this is MoMA New York is one of the locations where people say, oh, you're in there, you've made it, you're inside, you're in the inner circle.
You're in the pearly gates.
yeah, you're in the pearly gates. You're on the other side of the pearly gates.
Sorry.
And actually our intervention was saying, that doesn't matter anymore. Location, being inside or outside, has no meaning anymore. And then strangely, then what we did get was a lot of, oh, now your work is in MoMA. You've made it. You're on the inside, and we were going like, no. We put it there ourselves. And then they would say, oh, that's even better. So somehow people wanted to hold on to that idea that location meant something, even though we thought we were showing that it didn't mean anything. So,
the precious, you're kind of taking it down, but everybody still celebrated it up again.
Yeah. Anyway, it's like, who am I to complain? But that was very specifically the reason for doing it, and the reason for using that sort of AR technology instead of the image trigger technology, which you used your sculpture. I mean, obviously, with with the AR you're doing with your sculptures, you want to meld the sculpture and the augmented image into a unit or an assemblage, as Rira White is calling it, with respect to Deleuze and Guattari's theories of assemblage. But so it had a very different. It had more of a sort of a street art, sort of guerrilla street art feeling behind it, and Mark went on to organize also the AR Occupy Wall Street
Right.
protest when you weren't allowed to protest directly in front of the New York Stock Exchange. It was barricaded off, and so he put out another call. And I think this was only like a year later in 2011, saying, put up your protest art here, or send me. His own piece was, send me photographs of you holding up a protest sign. I'll cut you out and I'll put you up in my app, and you'll be protesting there. So I talk about it now in terms of these of this type of AR, creating sort of visual memes that can be taken by anyone, can be shared by anyone. For AR Occupy Wall Street, I had my rain of gold with this rain of gold coins, and I made that accessible all over the world. So I got photographs from Australia and from Japan and from Berlin and from other places. So I think of it as creating a system to create a visual meme that that can be shared, that can be created by anyone and shared by anyone.
Very interesting. Yeah. So, it opens up with your own work and your commitment to sort of a political consciousness, which you've worked. Many of your pieces have engaged and connected to. I mean, I thought it was very interesting. You're talking about sight and the body, but also about a sort of an identity or cultural identity.
Often,
and
yeah.
You've made a lot of pieces around that. And so, was AR sort of a natural extension of your interests with that kind of cultural identity, and investigating it, critiquing it, enlarging it? Was AR an important part of that?
Yeah, the 15 years beforehand, from basically 1994 until 2010, I had been working with VR. I mean, people don't like to call it VR these days, because right now VR only is used to refer to stereo interactive 3D computer graphics. And what happened in 1994 was this shift, as I mentioned, of the technology going to only working on workstations, really expensive workstations, to working on PCs. And so there was this big boom in online virtual worlds. But because the technology wasn't right for the headsets at that point, people were looking at these mostly on monitors. And I did my first VR piece at that point as producer and creative director of the first 3D online virtual world for children, Starbright World. And Steven Spielberg was the chairman of Starbright Foundation at that time. It was his idea to create a virtual world where kids in hospitals could come out of their beds and meet each other in a virtual world.
Wow.
And, in that context of the hospital, the doctors were going like, no, you're not going to put these poor kids in these helmets, which make them even more sick than they already are.
Right. Right.
So it's like, okay, just put it on the monitor and don't attach any machines to their body. They're already attached daily to machines that are trying to keep them alive. They don't need that. So I really took that to heart. And the first piece that I did of my own work using this technology, Beyond Manzanar, together with the Iranian American artist Zara Houshmand, was called Beyond Manzanar. So it was about the Manzanar incarceration camp in Eastern California, where around 10,000 Japanese American men, women, and children were incarcerated, one of 10 camps around the country. And Zara's part as an Iranian American was to take the more recent layer of threats to intern Iranian Americans in the 1979-1980 Iranian hostage crisis to show, look, this is not just something that happened to Japanese Americans at this one time. It's something that the American government thinks about and tries over and over again. And our piece came out in 2000. A year later, 9/11 happened, and all of a sudden, Muslim men are being rounded up, interrogated, put in, incarcerated without evidence. So that you can tell is very site specific. I rebuilt part of the Manzanar internment camp. After that, there was a piece, Travels of Mariko Horo, which is sort of a fantasy time traveling Japanese woman artist invents the West out of her imagination.
Yeah, I was reading about that. I've never seen, I think you showed the Manzanar piece
Manzanar piece. At Edin Murat's
the moving image,
images.
right?
Yeah,
Moving into
yeah,
art
exactly.
there, right? I saw
Yeah.
that, but I didn't see this one. This sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
This woman is projecting into the West. Please explain further.
Yeah, yeah, it's hasn't been showed a whole lot. I showed it, did show it in the San Jose Museum, which owns the first edition of Beyond Manzanar. But you know, there's this whole genre of Japanese art, pre-modern Japanese art, where artists were in Japan were imagining the West because they weren't allowed to leave the country. But there were images and stories and some books seeping in through the Dutch who were allowed to go to this one artificial island in the Nagasaki Bay. So there were these artists who were fascinated by the concept of such strange peoples and strange customs, and they did all these paintings and these drawings about these weird peoples and how they go riding their elephants on Sundays, you know, because the elephant was also from the West and it was also exotic. So the boundaries, you know, everything between China and the western tip of Europe got subsumed into the category of other lands.
Yeah, right.
And it wasn't really clear to them where the boundaries are, just as the, you know, I think maybe the earliest depictions are from like the 15th century in Burgundy, depictions of Marco Polo and the Polo brothers, his father and uncle, encountering Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, sorry, who, however, was depicted kind of as this like white person in Persian robes, because they couldn't imagine what an Asian looked like either, you know? So for them, everything between Turkey and Japan was subsumed into this category of the other. Yeah. You know, so the piece is very much about using images from art history, from European art history and Japanese art history, to understand how people imagine the other when they never see the other. They cannot go there, they cannot see these people, they only hear stories. And it's just wild, absolutely wild.
Yeah, that's totally true. I mean, you know, it's the barrier of the mind, the barrier of conception, which is still very active today. You know, people can't imagine, and empathy, things like empathy and also imagination, for that matter.
Yeah.
You know, these are important details. So, you know, another thing that I thought was really kind of interesting about your work in general, but also about AR, and I wondered if you had some thoughts about this, because this has kind of been a sub-theme of some of the conversations that I've been having, is that the idea of sight is very involved and very intricate when we're talking about AR. And of course, that was part of the title of the show, Sight and Parasite. And because I really, you know, I've always, I haven't done that much sort of classically site-specific work, but I'm always intrigued by sight, and I always respond to sight in some way, no matter what project I'm doing, no matter where it's going to be, etc. And I think that that's one of the other things that intrigued me a lot about AR, was that it could it relocated sight as an important detail, right?
Right, yeah.
And gave knowledge and nuance and complexity to a project,
exactly,
almost automatically, but
yes,
for sure out of the choice of the artist, the development of the work and all that stuff. I wondered what your thoughts are about sight, and maybe also, I mean, I'm not sure that you would call yourself a sculptor, and yet at the same time, you're often dealing with three-dimensional forms. They're digital forms, but nonetheless 3D. And then adding this site component is kind of an interesting bailiwick, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess the point the summary point I forgot to make about that, those two, what I call my vintage VR, plus the my last piece with this type of VR technology, virtuelle Mauer, reconstructing the wall, about the Berlin Wall. These are all site-specific VR. The Manzanar internment camp in Eastern California, Venice, which ended up being essentially the site on which all the fantasies of Europe were piled up by Mariko Horo, and then the Berlin Wall. And the specific physical characteristics of all these sites were very important. But each piece took me 5 years to research, to try and get some money, and then to build the site. And once I built the site, only then could I start playing around with it. And when I started doing AR, it was a revelation. It was, the site already exists. I don't have to do that. And I think the fastest I've done any AR artwork was maybe within 2 hours. When I was in Lisbon, and I realized the square where the Carnation Revolution started was literally around the corner from my hospital. And I'm like, I can do this. Like 2 hours later, I've got these carnations falling from the sky. So yes, it was very specifically the attraction of being able to enhance a site with content. And my line on this is augmented reality is merely the latest way that we enhance sight. We enhance sight maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago. The first time one person said to another, you know what happened here on this hill? Da 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 da. So, telling stories about what happened here before is an augmented reality experience, but it's an oral experience, a verbal experience. And when we put a memorial there, we're augmenting that site. If we put, some sort of building to house the deity that appeared here, we're augmenting that site with all sorts of layers of our culture. Of course, depending on your culture, the building looks different. The stories will be different. So, I always say AR is simply the latest way, and the way that, we don't have to have like millions of dollars in order to build a building, or hundreds of thousands of dollars to make a sculpture, or years of patience in order to go through all those authorities who decide whether or not we can do exactly what we want to do here. So now, just as we can put our work anywhere in the world, including inside MoMA or inside the Venice Biennial that we did in 2011, we can also augment the site with whatever content we want. We can memorialize whatever we want. And I'm working with, I've worked with the Caribbean Cultural Center and African Diaspora Institute in East Harlem, Spanish Harlem in Manhattan, to put their culture on their streets. And I'm working right now in San Jose, Japantown, to put not only the Japanese American culture, but the Chinese American and Filipino American culture that actually coexisted over what is called Japantown in San Jose on the streets there, at a level that would take years and a lot of money and a lot of patience if you were to do it in physical, with physical sculptures. But yeah, it's I guess I've always been interested in space. So maybe I'm a sculptor of space, or I think in terms of installations, and the objects are part of what's defining the space. So I love creating 3D objects. This thing here, this red algae, I would love to create.
Which was your contribution to the Site and Parasite exhibition, the red algae, right?
But I'd love to make an actual physical sculpture of that thing and then enhance it with AR. It
Sure.
takes just as you took years to figure out how to make your inflatable
Yeah.
sculptures, it probably take me a while to figure out how to make that thing and augment it properly. But yeah, for me, I mean, I see also your inflatable sculptures as defining space with physical objects in a very strong way.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny about that space, because about that inflatable space, because it really is a skin,
Yeah.
and there's something completely impenetrable about the object. You can't get in it. You can't, and that has to do with the design, the double chamber design, etc. But initially, I had a lot of impulses when I started coming to that space and wondering about how to handle that space. Very difficult space, and it had all these parameters that I had to follow. It wasn't just a free, wide open space. I could, I had to make sure, various things. And, the idea of something impossible, something unreachable, which was also an important part to me of the show, a kind of a utopia, a collision of utopias, so to speak, because that inflatable thing really peaked in the 60s with people like House Rucker and whatnot. And then, and lots of other people, Ant Farm and all kinds of other events and things, but also collided now with this AR, but ancillary to what you were saying about AR and the ability to enhance a site or augment it or give it new affordances, there's also another aspect, and that is that multiple channels can be enacted, right? So in other words, I could do a channel, you can do a channel, anyone can do a channel that has the desire, the know-how, the means to realize that, which was one of the things that I really wanted in this show, right? Was the idea that these were, the artists that were involved in the AR component weren't thematically organized. Or weren't organized in a typical, weren't organized in any typical way. They were organized almost as options, possibilities, potentialities, right? And, but it was also really important to me always from the very first day when I proposed the project to Grants for Sculpture, I said, there's a component where other people are involved, that other people are doing augments through these places. And it gives a kind of really rich experience, I think. Can be confusing to the viewer. We didn't quite work out the interface as well as we might have, but those are but people got it. I mean, so people that, different levels of expertise, people definitely experienced it and got it.
So what was your behind your strong desire to involve other things? Was it just wanting to see what sort of what other dimensions the space could take on?
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing that I think is really important about AR is this notion of a portal to another place. And it's not it's a fine distinction. It's not a metaphorical place. It's more of a synecdochal place. And I know that's I don't want to get into the tiny little minutiae of the linguistic change. But the point is that there is something, despite the fact that we're connecting to other places and works, there's always something real about that other place and work. And so I love that idea of the portal and of a site. But the other thing that was important is because of my background with my intrigue with Joseph Beuys and the idea of social sculpture, which I believe later became, relational aesthetics. I think it's never mentioned, or they never talk about Joseph Beuys. They almost ignore it. I think for political reasons and for other reasons, but I think just that tendency in art and how it's evolved over time and been molded. I was very interested in that as well, and so the idea of social sculpture, but in this sense, there's a sort of a chorus of voices that are present in the work. And that was always interesting and important to me. And also on a very democratic level. In other words, all I did, I mean, certainly it happened in the context of my work, and my targets were what activated, but people could have proposed targets. They could have had all kinds of responses to things. And, but basically after that, each one of your voices was heard, right? As you see fit in the way that you wanted to do it. And so I don't want to make a grand claim, too grand a claim or too hyperbolic a claim, but the idea of organizing creative action within a social environment, allowing everybody's individual voice to be seen and to be heard, that is fascinating to me. And I think that bodes for wonderful potentialities, both cultural and artistic and social.
And it does set up a dialogue rather than sort of an open dialogue rather than a closed system, which is interesting. I mean, especially as all of these artists who are famous for their non-augmented practices now start doing VR, start doing AR,
right. And start redoing everybody's work again.
No, it's like that's a whole nother topic.
I know I've seen your work 2 or 3 other times done by somebody else, as if it's the new thing or something.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting. So some part of me is saying like, okay, now everyone else is doing it, so I can do whatever I damn well please. So I'm starting to do 2D work again. I want to do real work again. But I have now a little bit more encounter with people who come from, say, the art market world, and see how driven they are to produce things that sell. And that tends to mean producing things that look like the other things they've made that have sold before. And I just sort of sit there and go, wow, that's so that's so different from the reason that took me into art and drove me into art, the sort of experimental aspect where, as an art student, what you are taught essentially is that art is this this exploration of new ways of seeing, new ways of creating, new ways of being, and then you start you get out of the art academy and you start seeing the people who are making money and making a living at doing it, and it's like they're not experimenting, they're not developing,
exploring anything.
maybe they did once or twice, and then now they're capitalizing on it. So and that would have been so boring. I mean, it would have been nice if I could have gotten rich off of it, but it would have been so totally boring.
Isn't that interesting? I feel exactly the same way. And I've always been interested, or maybe I've evolved in this direction, but been interested in the creation in projects, and projects that are bigger than what I can hold, or bigger than what I can handle. Maybe I don't have the technical knowledge or the technical expertise, or maybe, maybe a bunch of maybes in there. And this exhibition was certainly like that. I'd never done any inflatables before. I had done augmented reality. I sort of evolved my own relationship with AR and sculpture as a platform, that sculpture image interactivity as a platform. But without that sense of investigation, of wanting to know something and wanting to see something happen that I had not seen before. And also to be there with other people, kind of doing the same thing, that is just tremendously exciting to me. Whereas, there couldn't be, we used to call it the oath of no growth. The painter who makes that same painting over and over and over again, the sculptor, the artist and they wouldn't ever risk their market by doing something off brand or off. And I think that you were also saying that the artists that have been reached out to and touched and said, why don't you do a project in AR? And Apple has sponsored it and various other people. And when you see the works, they are their works, that style or that, you know, that hook that they use. And basically they worked with I'm imagining, I doubt they learned the technology. And so they're working with a technician who's kind of helping them develop it and deliver it. Nothing wrong with that per se. But the point is that it becomes a media exchange. It's transactional. It's not investigative. It's, at least that's the way it sort of feels to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think, you know, some artists will grow beyond that, but certainly like the first things that you see from them are largely okay. Let's take this idea from my existing work and try it in AR or in VR. So, you know, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that grows. But
I mean, I think it's interesting. I've always had a problem. I mean, when you come to a new technology, it has its own parameters. It has its own limits. It has its own edges.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think somebody once told me about an article they'd read, and I don't remember the article and all this stuff, but new technologies tend to either mimic what has been done before out of a sense of comfort and, you know, also to make them more palatable to the environment, or they offer up new affordances, new opportunities. And for me,
which is what you hope.
Yeah, and that's all I'm interested in. It's like, oh my God, how do I deal with this? This is tough. This is really a difficult problem. So, you know, and I think AR is particularly poignant or pronounced in a funny kind of way because, you know, there's no moment in AR that isn't constructed, and people are aware of that construction by coming to it. Like film always had the possibility that it was an illusion of something real, and that it was there, present. And we see a photograph, a portrait of somebody, so well, there they are, as if that is that person. Of course, it's not. But AR, you come to it, it is 100% artificial to start. There's no question that you're observing a construction, right? And yet, there we are. We still fold into kind of a, you know, I don't know. I don't want to. It's not as simple as a suspension of disbelief, but we still fold into something there. We still are captivated by it. We find ourselves, you know, lost in a sea of science.
Well, there's, of course, a very wide variety of what people do in AR, and you know, in manifest.ar, we were always amazed at John Craig Freeman, because he works very, very quickly, and he can make extremely realistic things very, very quickly. Yeah. So he's gone away from that a little bit with his point clouds, because there he's letting more of the process show through. But that was always interesting as sort of one pole on the spectrum, because he was able to make things so realistic that often his screenshots would look like they were really there. And I think a lot of his concept was that, you know, you're experiencing something as if it was really there. Whereas I think my things tend to be more abstract, maybe not in a visual sense, but in a conceptual sense, that there were things that were clearly not there, were not really there because they couldn't really happen that way, whether it's, you know, a rain of you know, flowers or coins or whatever from the sky, or you know, strange strange things. Where is it? It's here. Strange strange objects floating around in space that do not and cannot exist at this macroscopic scale. So there, I think there's a wide span of how each of us plays around with that. It's not really there, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm showing you some sort of idea of what could be there.
Right.
So yeah, that's I think a very important part of playing around with the medium.
So I'm curious. So what's ahead for you? What are you working on, or what's your next step?
Well, I'm involved in one project with marine microbiologist in the Yucatan, Luisa Ifa Con, and you know, when I was when I was looking at these red algae that cause toxic red tides, I also started reading up about cyanobacteria blooms that create green tides. Lake Erie, I think, was plagued with them. It tends to be more like inland waters, and the red algae are more in ocean water, ocean coastal areas. But cyanobacteria were also the oldest fossils on Earth. So the oldest living uh, 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 living creature of which we have a record, and they were responsible about 2.5 billion years ago for the Great Oxygen Event, which brought free oxygen into the atmosphere for the first time, poisoning a lot of the existing life, but making it possible for, you know, animals like you and me to evolve. And there are these stromatolites, which are essentially colonies. They're like reef colonies made out of these cyanobacteria that sit there on the surface, photosynthesizing. A form of cyanobacteria is also that which makes green plants green, and they are the photosynthetic cells in plants.
Wow.
So they're amazing bacteria, and they sit there on the surface, and they photosynthesize, and they're pulling the carbon dioxide out of the water and secreting then calcium carbonate, limestone, you know, a variety of limestone. So they're creating these structures that over thousands of years get larger. And they're endangered in the Yucatan. So we're making this AR app where you can see, again, there's all this invisible things. They just look like dead rocks. But Louisa said, you know, can you make them look like they're alive, that they're breathing, that they're, you know, they're involved in all of these cycles of you know, taking CO2 and transforming it into nutrients and free oxygen. So we're trying to do, by the end of January, first cut at that AR. And that's also very similar to a mixed reality project that I just got funding from the state of Bavaria to do, that I call Elemental Spaces, which again is about these exchanges of elements and how these different elements are important to the life cycles on the Earth. You know, partially because I've been doing all of these artworks that deal with sort of mutant plants that are showing, hopefully showing people how we're destroying the environment. But I got more interested in understanding, yeah, I understand that, you know, carbon is taken out of the air by plants, and we're putting more in than the plants can take out, and more into the atmosphere than the oceans can absorb. But how does it all sort of fit together? And this is also an exploration where I'm sort of diving into the water and saying, well, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to make this all work, but here's my, you know, rough plan, and let's see if we can do it. So those are a couple of big things. And then, like I said, you know, I can, since everyone else is doing VR and AR, I can do other things now. So I have a artificial intelligence exhibit that premiered in September here in Munich. Are you on my mailing list? Did you get like a ridiculously long newsletter from me?
Sure, I am, but I'd love to be. I'll send you my email. So,
you know, or if it's the same one, yeah,
same one. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Love to.
I'll check it out. But so we've got another exhibit coming up in January where we let you essentially donate your face.
I'm on your list.
Okay, yeah. Lend me your face. Yeah, okay. Lend me your face is the project. So, you know, we found some deep fake software that a researcher had very kindly put on GitHub. And we can take one photograph of your face and then get you to and animate your face with whoever's video we put behind it, whether it's, you know, Trump or Obama or Boris Johnson or you know, whoever. So that's coming up, and that's really fun for me because, you know, I started out my art career doing the product design for the first commercial AI supercomputer, the Connection Machine.
Right.
But I hadn't done
which
any.
Just was purchased by MoMA or last year?
That was it was purchased in 2016 actually.
Oh, 2016. Sorry.
Yeah, after like some very hard work on my part, and was exhibited in 2017, the year of my 60th birthday. The machine was 30 years old at that point. And then again at the reopening of MoMA last year, it was featured in another exhibit by Paolo Antonelli, who's the curator who had brought it into the museum. Yeah, so after that, you know, people were going, oh, and you do AI art too, and I was going like, no, I don't. So it was past time that I really do an AI piece, and came up with this idea that I really liked. And again, it's very political. You're you know, you've joined you're part of the choir. You're preaching to the choir, and you're part of the choir. And no, you don't get to choose which politicians you are aping. And that's not part of the deal.
That's great. Well,
you're letting up your face and you're giving up control.
That's all good stuff. Well, I think we're coming to the end here. And
tell me quickly what you're doing. What are you working on?
You know, I actually did something very similar to you, or it's not similar to you. I opened up, I've been doing an awful lot of drawing. I've been doing an awful lot of, I've kind of reconstructing my, I don't know, my aesthetic, artistic response to things. Oh, wow. And I've been doing, I have a daily habit of keeping notes in my journal. You're and so then good. I also have a bunch of drawings that I'm making. I'm doing a lot of research into various areas. I'm kind of wide open, you know. So I'm not, you know, sort of honed in or focused on any particular thing. I'm kind of experiencing a lot of stuff. I recently, I mean, of course, I've got a lab at the university, and we have all kinds of techniques and technologies. But I recently, they're so inexpensive right now, these 3D printers. So I brought some 3D printers into my house, which I just can't believe I did.
In your house?
Oh my God.
You're lucky that Marianne's an artist too.
Yeah, that's right. She's happy. she's happy to support it, actually. And I've got sort of a challenge going on with myself that the machines don't sit fallow for more than 2 hours.
So man, you are good. You are good. You make me feel like a a lazy.
Well, it's only, I mean, in a way, it's just all right here in this little ecosystem. It's hardly a reach at all, you know. But
great place to be locked down.
Yeah, but the other thing is that I'm sort of in doubt about it all. Like, what is this going to do for anything or anyone or any like, why am I doing it? Why am I still attracted to this? And at the same time, I don't see any direct, I mean, again, I'm exploring and trying to graft ideas onto these experiences and stuff like that. And then try to imagine how that might turn into something bigger than me.
Great. Yeah.
Bigger than my little scritchy scratchies.
That's what artists do. I mean, that's what artists should do.
Yeah. Hey, well, I'm so pleased that you participated in this show.
Well, thank
you. And
you
also, we never had met, really. We met one time prior. And so I was really pleased to make your acquaintance. And
likewise.
And I love being on your site. I hope everybody will go visit it. It's tamikothiel.com. And when this video comes out, we'll have a little card in the beginning, and it'll say all your information and stuff. And I hope that people will go and experience what you've got there and watch for you in future exhibitions and stuff. But
You're really sweet, and yeah, send me when it goes online, send it around, and I'll post it
we
all
will.
over. And
That's why I'm so glad that this is part of the ISC, the International Sculpture Center, because if it was up to me, I wouldn't be able to take care of all the little details. I just my head for details is all about my art, and and so I really am grateful to them that they've invited me to do this. And so they'll make sure to contact you, and it'll go out on the boards and all that sort of stuff. So
they're really amazing. They really put a lot of effort into it, not just like saying, okay, let's put up some art and take it down and put up some more art, but really engage with it.
Yeah, they really have. And I think their focus is really interesting, and it'll, especially sculpture in the digital age, what is going to happen? How is that going to evolve? How's that going to grow? And particularly with what's going on with the COVID and all that. And I don't know that we're going to have plague after plague, but I think we're going to have a lot of challenges coming forward. And so this is just the beginning, maybe. It sounds so dark, but
it's real. I mean, these things, these things, here we go.
Yeah, there you go.
They are a plague already. They shut down the coast of Florida for almost a year, and global warming is just making them happy as ducks in a pond.
Yeah.
So
and then, recently there was an article about somebody would go regularly and watch the Earth through the satellite cameras, right? You could see the pictures of the Earth. And they were talking about how many fires there were last year and how evident it was from outer space that you could see the brown smudge of the fire stretching all over Earth. And,
it's a New York Times article. I've saved it. I have to read it.
Yeah, it's quite good, actually.
Yeah.
But, we've got our work cut out for us. That's for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad that there's even in this year of lockdowns and existential terror, then I'm very grateful that there's technology, that the technology like Zoom and other conferencing systems.
Everybody says they like to hate on it. I just hate this thing. Oh my God, I've had so many wonderful experiences through Zoom.
And imagine this year without it.
Oh God,
imagine this year without it.
Terrible. Right. And access to information and all of the above. And what your friends are doing, what they're about. I've participated in a couple of online drawing bees that the artist John Simon has put together. We just get he's set this thing up, but everybody comes. There's no judgment. People chat and draw about a subject. He offers a subject.
Wow.
And I've found these events to be quite enjoyable and very relaxing.
Wow. Is there room for more? Or are they...
Oh yeah. If you go to I think he did a thing called drawing your own path. And I think if you look that up, let me just do it real quick.
John Simon, right?
Yeah, John Simon Jr., right.
Yeah, I might have his email. We were actually, I think we were in the in the Whitney show together.
Yeah, wait, the bit streams?
Nay, it was called Programming. Christiana Paul.
Right.
I think he was in that show.
Sure. Right.
Also, yeah.
Yeah, so it's called Drawing Your Own Path. And if you just type that in .com, it'll take you to the drawing bees that he has.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I hope to see you there. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be great. I need to start drawing again. Okay, well, keep on keeping on. Keep up the wonderful work. And I really appreciate that in your book that you talked about that process and how difficult it was and all that, because it makes it so much richer and gives so much inspiration for other artists who are sitting there saying, like, should I really do this? It's going to be a lot of work,
Oh boy. And these days it's like, God, learn another piece of software. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But anyway. All right. Well, hey, have a wonderful New Year.
Okay, you too.
I really look forward to seeing you sometime along the road. I will.
Yeah.
And she sends her best too.
Okay.
All
You
right.
take
Bye-bye
care
now.
then.
Take care.
Bye now.